In this video, we'll go over cards which are useless at one copy and ranking them in order of a combination of exactly how useless they are in one copy and how useful they were in the meta. And at number 10, we have Gather Your Mind. Now, this card isn't exactly what you would call meta, but it is an excellent example of what this list is all about, as the card is literally useless at one copy in your deck. Because you see, its effect is to simply add another copy of Gather Your Mind from your deck to your hand. So if you do not have another copy of Gather Your Mind in your deck, then you can't use the card. Now, a lot of the other cards in this list can still be used even if they're only at one copy, mainly due to the fact that the rest of those cards on this list are monster cards. But Gather Your Mind is a special brand of card, which requires other copies of itself in order to work, and can make itself redundant by just using its own effect. Because after you use the effect twice, the third copy of Gather Your Mind in your hand won't be usable, unless you find a way to reset the other two copies in your graveyard back into your deck, with something like the Transmigration Prophecy or Jar of Avarice. Now, there are some uses of being able to use Gather Your Mind, like in some kind of spell counter draw deck, or decks which like a specific amount of spells in the graveyard, like Sky Strikers, but it hasn't really seen competitive play, because Toon Table of Contents can do what this card is trying to do, but better, since it doesn't have a hard once per turn, and the third copy isn't dead in your hand. And at number 9, we have Night Assailant. This is a flip effect monster, where if it's flipped face up, you get to destroy one monster your opponent controls. So effect similar to Maneater Bug. It has another effect where if this card is sent from your hand to the graveyard, you can target one flip monster in your graveyard, except this card, in order to return that target to your hand. Now, this card is currently limited to one copy on the ban list, and that's because if you have two copies of Night Assailant, you can infinitely use its hand discard effect to add the second copy of it from your graveyard back to your hand. On screen, I'll be showing an example of Snipe Hunter using Night Assailant in order to infinitely use its effect to destroy all the cards on the field. As Snipe Hunter has the effect where you can discard one card in order to roll a 6-sided die, and as long as the result is not 1 or 6, then the card is destroyed. And since the effect is not once per turn, it's limited by its resource cost effect, which is rendered moot if you can infinitely use the effect with 2 Night Assailants. Now, there aren't a lot of cards in the game which can be used to great effect by infinitely discarding, ever since they eroded Bryonic Dragon of the Ice Barrier's effect. Although there are a lot of good cards in the game which have discard costs, and you could essentially have an infinite supply of those discard costs if there was just 2 Night Assailants in the game. So Night Assailant has a broken effect if there's another copy of it allowed in the game. However, at one copy, it's completely fine and actually a little bit useless, as it's just a slightly better Maneater Bug, because it has the additional effect from the hand where maybe you can get back into the flip effect monster. In fact, the limit list kind of exists for cards like Night Assailant and the other cards on this list, where there's no need to really ban any of these cards on the list if they ever become a problem, because you can completely render their effects useless by just putting them to one copy, which is what they did for this card and the next spot on this list. And at number 8, we have Zoodiac Ratpier. This card has the effect that when it's normal summoned, you can send a Zoodiac card from your deck to your hand. Additionally, it has an effect where if it's an Xyz material to a monster whose original type is Beast Warrior, it will grant that Xyz monster the effect, where once per turn they can detach one of its materials in order to special summon a copy of Zoodiac Ratpier from your hand or deck. Now, the Zoodiac archetype specializes in one card Xyz summon, so if you're able to get any Zoodiac monster on the field, they can immediately go into any Zoodiac Xyz monster. So if you get Zoodiac Ratpier in the field and then slap it down an Xyz monster on top of it, its effect will immediately be live in order to search out another copy of Zoodiac Ratpier from your deck. And then you can just slap down another Xyz monster on the new Zoodiac Ratpier in order to use the effect again, because its effect is only a soft once per turn. And there's even a Zoodiac Xyz monster called Zoodiac Tiger Mortar, which allows you to detach one of its materials in order to attach a Zoodiac monster from your graveyard to a Zoodiac Xyz monster you control. So if Tiger Mortar has 2 materials, and one of them is Zoodiac Ratpier, you can use the first Zoodiac Ratpier's effect in order to special summon one from the deck. Then you can use Tiger Mortar's effect in order to detach Zoodiac Ratpier from the card, send it to the graveyard, and then immediately reattach it to itself in order to reset its once per turn, and then immediately use it again to search out your third copy of Zoodiac Ratpier from the deck. And since every Zoodiac Ratpier you brought out could be used as a full Xyz material for another Zoodiac monster, Zoodiac Ratpier was a monster of card advantage, as I've been showing you on screen with what Zoodiac's capable at full power, thanks to Zoodiac Ratpier, where they can get a full board of monsters out with a single card in their starting hand. And in fact, Zoodiac Ratpier was so good that it shot Zoodiacs to tier 0 status, which is an incredibly rare situation to happen. So they hit Zoodiac Ratpier on the ban list and put it to 2 copies, and it didn't slow down the archetype at all. And then they hit the guard again to 1 copy, essentially killing its effect. So Zoodiac Ratpier is essentially banned, since you can't actually use its XC's effect at all. However, its mill effect is still useful, which means the card isn't completely useless, and why it's only the number 8 spot on this list. The card was limited and still saw competitive play, even though one of its effects was literally rendered unusable. And at number 7, we have Baobaboon. This is a card which has 2 effects. One of them is if this card is summoned, you get to draw 1 card and then place 1 card from your hand on top or bottom of your deck. And also, if this card is destroyed by battle or card effect, you get to special summon any number of Baobaboons from your deck. So, its first effect on summon is actually pretty nice. It technically doesn't give you any card advantage, but it does an important thing of allowing you to set your garnets back into your deck. And if the card is destroyed in any way, you get to go +1 off its effect of being able to special summon 2 other copies of it from your deck. And none of its effects are hard once per turn. So the 2 other copies you bring out from your deck also get to allow you to draw a card and then place 1 back into your deck. So the card is actually pretty good in a generic sense, and saw some competitive play because of the advantage it's able to generate. However, the card is basically useless at 1 copy, because part of what makes the card good is being able to special summon 2 other copies of it from your deck. However, without the effect, it still allows you to reset garnets in your hand with that mulligan, so it still has some useful effects outside of its floating effect, which is why it's slightly lower on this list, just like Zoodiac Ratpier. If it was at 1 copy, it could still be used, although it definitely would be neutered from its full potential. And at number 6, we have Photon Sabre Tiger. This is a level 3 monster with 2000 attack, which has the effect that when it's normal summoned, you get to add another copy of Photon Sabre Tiger from your deck to your hand. Additionally, it has a negative effect on the field, where if you do not control another copy of this card, it loses 800 attack. Now, this is one of those cards that has high attack for its level because it has a downside attached to it, as the maximum attack for level 3 monsters without a negative effect is 1750 as shown by Jerry Beansman. So the intended use of the card is to obviously get other copies of Photon Sabre Tiger on the field. That way it doesn't lose its 2000 attack points. Although, the ability to search out another copy on summon itself is actually pretty useful, as it's just a pure +1 in card advantage. So Photon Sabre Tiger saw niche competitive success, basically in decks that needed a level 3 monster with either its type or attribute, as it could grant you advantage when you got the card on the field, like in Skill Drain Beast Beatdown decks. Skill Drain is a continuous trap card which negates the effects of all monsters on the field, and since most monsters like to use their effects on the field, Skill Drain can kinda win you the game on its own against a lot of decks, which is why the card is limited to 1 copy currently. However, Photon Sabre Tiger benefits under the effects of Skill Drain, as its attack will always be 2000 regardless if there's other copies of Photon Sabre on the field. And if you didn't have Skill Drain on the field yet, then you could use this effect to search and go +1, or just wait until your opponent's turn in order to activate Skill Drain. And then the card would be comboed with stuff like Horn of the Phantom Beast in order to boost its attack even further and allow it to draw cards when it destroys things by battle, further allowing you to keep your card advantage while locking down your opponent. And throw it in cards like Hazy Flame Cerberus who could do the same thing, you have an anti-meta control beast deck, which takes advantage of Photon Sabre Tiger. However, this deck was never super competitive, and it's way too slow for the modern meta game to be a viable control deck. Whatever the case, Photon Sabre Tiger saw some niche competitive play in the past, and is also completely useless at 1 copy, since you both can't use its search effect, nor can you possibly avoid its negative effect to reduce its attack by 800, as it doesn't have any other effects that are useful on its own unlike the previous 3 spots. And at number 5, we have Hero Kid. This is a card which has the effect that when it's special summoned, you get to special summon any number of Hero Kids from your deck. Since this is a level 2 warrior monster, you can actually special summon this card from your deck with the Soldate's second effect, which will proc its effect to special summon the other 2 copies of it, essentially allowing you to have Isolde bring out 3 monsters from the deck with its 1 effect, which has been useful in a lot of warrior combo decks in the past, as it turns Isolde's already +1 effect into a +3. Although while this was a really good combo with warrior decks, it wasn't a widely used combo in topping competitive warrior decks, as they didn't really need the +3 that Hero Kid provided, because it also required you to play 3 garnets, as you never want to draw any singular copy of Hero Kid, because they were literally only useful in your deck. And obviously the card would be useless at 1 copy, as it's just a low-statted warrior monster with no other effects, besides interacting with other copies of itself. And at number 4, we have Evil Thorn. This monster has the effect where you contribute this card in order to inflict 300 points of damage to your opponent. Then, if you do, you can special summon up to 2 other copies of it from your deck in attack position, but their effects cannot be activated. Seeing as the effect of the card is completely dependent on having other copies of the card in your deck, you wouldn't want to be able to use the 2 other cards you brought with its effect anyway, so it's not really a big deal. So Evil Thorn is just a pure +1 in card advantage, as it allows you to turn 1 card on the field into 2 cards on the field with its effect, assuming you have 3 copies of the card, of course. And this card was used in the OCG with the Phoenixian Cluster Amaryllis FTK, as you could win on your first turn if you were able to get 10 plant-type monsters in the graveyard. And Evil Thorn was an excellent way to get 3 plants in the graveyard for only 1 card on the field that didn't require some special summoning condition, while also allowing you to set up plays in order to get other plants in the graveyard. Although Phoenixian Cluster Amaryllis was banned in the TCG before the card came out, which made it broken, so Evil Thorn never actually saw play in the TCG, even though it does technically have a pretty good effect. Although since it was used to competitive success in the OCG, and is useless at 1 copy, it gets a high spot on this list. And at number 3, we have Reborn Tengu. This card has the effect where simply, if it leaves the field, you get to special summon 1 Reborn Tengu from your deck. So what's unique about this card's floating effect is that it doesn't matter how it leaves the field. Well, just as long as it doesn't get returned to the deck, since cards can't activate their floating effects if they're returned to the deck unless they specifically say so, like Serpentine Princess. But it's very versatile in how the effect activates nonetheless. So if the card is sent to the graveyard for a synchro summon, you get to bring another card to your deck immediately, which allows you to get another level 4 monster on the field, to be used for another synchro summon, which was the main use for the card back when it first came out during the synchro era, and also why the card was restricted on the ban list to stop people from using synchro decks when the Xyz monsters came out. It also activates the effect if it's just removed from the field temporarily with stuff like World Legacy Clash, which turns the effect into a pure +1 in card advantage. It also activates if it's sent to the graveyard with a Link summon, a Tribute summon, or, of course, if it's removed from the field with a card effect or destroyed by battle. And without a once per turn, if you have a way to just reset other copies of it back into your deck, you could theoretically infinitely summon out Reborn Tengus. And the card enjoyed a long history of competitive success, and is completely unusable at 1 copy. And at number 2, we have Thunder Dragon. This card has the effect where you can discard this card from your hand in order to add 2 other copies of it from your deck to your hand. So it's a pure +1 in advantage if you add the other 2 copies, which is why the card saw play in the early days of the game, as just a way to get more cards in your hand to fuel discard effects. Then Konami decided to randomly create an entire archetype around this card, and it became the center stone of a competitive meta deck, where they use the gimmick of activating effects in your hand in order to proc their fusion monsters. And since Thunder Dragon allows you to add up to 2 Thunder Dragons from your deck to your hand, and its effect does not have a once per turn, if you have a card on the field like Thunder Dragon Titan, you can use this distinction in order to destroy more cards. One of the effects of Thunder Dragon Titan is that if a Thunder monster activates its effect in your hand, you can then destroy 1 card on the field. This effect is not once per turn and it doesn't target, so it's a really good form of removal. So if you have a singular Thunder Dragon in your hand, you can use this effect to add a single Thunder Dragon to your hand, which would proc Thunder Dragon Titan's effect to destroy 1 card on the field. Then you could use the other Thunder Dragon in your hand to add the 3rd copy to your hand, which would allow you to destroy another card with Thunder Dragon Titan. Although using its effect twice doesn't allow you to go +1 in card advantage, and is simply hand neutral. But this was kind of the whole point of Thunder Dragon decks, activating Thunder monster effects in the hand to use their effects, where Konami actually did a really good job of building an entire archetype around this old legacy card, while making it still usable in the deck. And since it's seen so much competitive play, and is also useless at 1 copy, it definitely deserves a high spot on this list. And at number 1, we have Destiny Hero Malicious. This card has the graveyard effect, where you can banish this card from your graveyard to special summon another copy of it from your deck. The effect is not once per turn, so getting a single Destiny Hero Malicious in the graveyard is akin to going +2 in card advantage. So while Thunder Dragon is a +1 at advantage and saw all kinds of competitive play because of the deck built around it, you do still need to have Thunder Dragon in your hand to use its effect. Destiny Hero Malicious allows you to get a +2 from the graveyard, which is infinitely more valuable. That means you could use Destiny Hero Malicious in your hand as a resource and then gain advantage from it again from the graveyard. Or just send it directly from your deck to the graveyard, as it's easier to do that than it is to add a card to your hand. And its effect is only dependent on having other copies of itself in your deck, so it can be played alongside other archetypes, and thanks to Link monsters, pretty much every archetype benefits from being able to go +2 from the graveyard with its effect. Although mainly Heroes and Dark Warrior decks, as they're able to more easily take advantage of getting the card into the graveyard, while gaining advantage. Although it's not just Hero or Dark Warrior decks that make use of it, Destiny Hero Malicious has kinda seen play ever since it first came out, and it hasn't really stopped seeing play. And this is why the card constantly goes on this semi-limited list, because if it's only at 2 copies in your deck, then it's simply a +1 in card advantage from the graveyard, as you'll only be able to use the effect a single time before you have to expend resources in order to reset the effect. And at 2 copies per deck, it's still usable and still provides good card advantage, so it still sees competitive play. Although the card would be completely unusable if it was limited to 1 copy, just like a lot of the other cards in this list. Although, since the card is too good at 3 copies, the semi-limited list basically exists for Destiny Hero Malicious. And I don't think any other card in the game has been on the semi-limited list longer than Destiny Hero Malicious, even if it constantly goes on and off of it. And cards like Malicious will probably never hit the Forbidden list, because if the effect is too broken, like Zoodiac Ratpier, there's no need to do anything other than just limit the card to 1 copy. So if they have effects that are ban-worthy, they don't need to be banned, which is kind of a funny distinction. And kind of the whole point of this list, 10 cards which would never actually be banned because there's no need to, even if their effects were obviously overpowered. Alright, and that's the list. Like always, if you have any ideas for future videos just like this one, seeing as this one was a suggestion from a previous video, I'd love to hear about them down in the comments.